Welcome to this special offering of Your Neighbor a Priest, where we will journey together each week exploring in roughly 5 minutes or less a different element of the Episcopal Church. This week, Holy Eucharist. The Holy Eucharist, also known as communion, is a sharing of the bread and wine in the gospel tradition that Jesus left for us in the Last Supper and was cemented as a central practice of our faith through the letters of Paul and the practices of the original followers of Jesus, as they often secretly met in homes to share in the stories of Jesus and to break bread together. In the Episcopal Church, the practice of the Holy Communion has long been practiced as a defining element of our identity as Christians, making connections with the long-standing traditions of the Church and ultimately connecting us back to Jesus Christ himself. When we practice communion in the Episcopal Church, we believe that Christ is made truly present in the bread and wine that is being offered. Following the words of the institution that Christ uttered, "Take and eat, take and drink, do this in remembrance of me." We take the bread as Jesus' body and the wine as his blood. And these are not merely symbolic terms, for a true transformation occurs in this practice wherein Christ is known wholly and fully in the form of bread and wine. Now, we do not exactly believe that the bread and wine literally become the flesh and blood of Christ, which is also known as transubstantiation, which is the prevalent belief in the Roman Catholic Church. But we in the Episcopal Church also do not believe that our practice of communion is held solely in this moment of worship, wherein the body and blood and bread and wine coexist with one another. This is also known as consubstantiation, which was the practice taught by Martin Luther in the early Reformation churches. As Episcopalians, we exist somewhere in the middle of these two prevalent theologies, again finding a via media or middle ground, upon which we find a certain stability in our practice that creates many avenues for all to come and worship with us, finding our own connection to God within the context of the communal body worshiping together that we call a congregation, which makes up a church. All who feel called to come to the Lord's table are welcome to come forward and receive communion. Traditionally, baptism, whether in the Episcopal Church or in any other Christian church, has been seen as a necessary process to walk through before receiving communion, in order to truly connect with the Eucharist in its full expression with the gathered body of faithful believers. While we still value that tradition and encourage folks to follow that tradition, we also welcome those who are not yet baptized to come and receive communion. If you're not yet baptized, you are welcome to receive communion. And we would love to talk with you about the fullness of what it means to receive communion after being baptized and formally welcomed into the household of God. When you come to the altar table or rail of an Episcopal church, you will receive consecrated, that is, specially blessed by a priest or bishop, bread, either in the form of a communion wafer or a piece of unleavened bread prepared by a parishioner, with most churches also offering a gluten-free option for those needing that. And you also receive consecrated wine that is offered from a common cup, or as we call it, a chalice. The common cup is an important piece of our offering of communion, as it speaks to the reality that we are all called to come to the table in community with one another, to humble ourselves before God, to access God through the same means, the same vessel as our neighbor, regardless of any differences we may possess. Just like our welcome to the font of baptism, no boundary is known at the table, whether infant, child, teen, or adult, male, female, or non-binary, LGBTQIA+, or belonging to any race or ethnicity. Receiving communion in one kind is seen as receiving communion in full. So if you feel the need to pass on the cup for whatever reason, know that you still have received the fullness of Eucharist. We look forward to welcoming you to the Lord's table, to share in the meal with us, to remember the promise of Jesus Christ, and the connection we have to one another and God through this practice. Thank you for joining me this week as we've explored what Holy Eucharist is and means for the Episcopal Church. I hope you'll join me next week as we explore what liturgy is. Until then, may God's blessing be with you, and know that my door is always open if you have more questions. Just drop me an email at nic@sslv.org, and we can find a time to meet, share a cup of coffee or tea, and talk more about this church that I love.